We were having dinner. It was Gay Pride Parade night.
Of course.
And we were downtown. We were having dinner. And so he had his back to the door, and I was, facing him. And all these queens came in. All these drag queens, fabulous, came in. And when they saw me, it was like, woo! And they came around the corner, and they saw him, and it was like, woo!
She's been called the goddess of pop, a fashion trailblazer, a music legend. From chart-topping hits to Oscar-winning roles, Cher has reinvented herself more times than most artists even get a single shot. We know the voice, unmistakable. We know the style, bold, fearless, iconic. We know the performances, the interviews, the headlines. But what we don't always see is the woman behind the glitter, the one who walked through fire and still found a way to shine. This is not just a story of fame. This is a story about a young girl who grew up feeling unwanted, who battled dyslexia in silence, who dropped out of high school at 16 with nothing but a dream and a little bit of grit. It's the story of a woman who fought to become a star, and then had to fight even harder to be a mother in a world that never gave her a break. A woman who lost and loved and stumbled, but never stayed down. Who raised 2 sons, one while the cameras were rolling, and one while no one was watching. Cher has stood in the spotlight for over 6 decades. But the story that matters most isn't about awards or red carpets. It's about what happened behind the curtain. The painful divorces, the miscarriages, the tension, the healing, the journey of supporting a transgender child in a world that didn't understand. The battles with addiction and mental health, not her own, but her son's. Through it all, she never stopped showing up. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but with love, with persistence, with raw humanity. So, if you think you know Cher, get ready to rethink everything. Because this isn't a story about fame. This is the story of Cher the mother, Cher the survivor, and Cher the human being behind the myth. And trust me, it's her most powerful story yet. The moment Cher met Sonny Bono, her life changed. Fast. She was just 16. He was 27. They met in a coffee shop in Los Angeles. Cher was shy, broke, and still trying to figure out who she was. Sonny was funny, fast-talking, and already working in the music industry under producer Phil Spector. He offered her a place to stay, strictly platonically at first. Just 2 lost souls with nothing to lose. What started as convenience turned into friendship. And then, love. Sonny saw something in Cher that no one else did. A voice unlike anything on the radio. And a style that didn't fit in but refused to go unnoticed. He helped her get studio jobs singing backup vocals for acts like the Ronettes and the Righteous Brothers. But he knew she wasn't meant to stay in the background. In 1964, they rebranded as a duo, Sonny and Cher. It wasn't just about the music, it was a whole aesthetic. Long hair, fur vests, attitude. They were different from the polished pop stars of the time. They looked like outsiders. They were outsiders, and young people loved them for it. Then came I Got You Babe. Released in 1965, it hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and made them instant stars. Suddenly, Sonny and Cher were everywhere. On radio, on stage, on magazine covers. Their love story was broadcast to the world, wrapped in harmonies and catchy hooks. They weren't just artists. They were a cultural moment. But behind the fame was a more complicated reality. Sonny was protective, but also controlling. He made most of the business decisions. He signed contracts in his name. He shaped Cher's image, sound, and career trajectory. Not always with her consent. He handled the money. She performed the magic. Cher was young and in love, but not blind. She later admitted that she often felt like a passenger in her own career. "I didn't really exist without him," she said. "I was just someone who wore clothes and sang songs." Still, they created something unforgettable. In 1971, they launched the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, a TV variety show that turned them into America's favorite couple. It wasn't just about music anymore. They were comedians, hosts, style icons. They joked, they sang, they laughed together on screen. But off-screen, the cracks deepened. Their marriage became a battleground, torn between love and ego, independence and control. Cher was growing into her own power. She wanted more say, more space, more creative freedom. Sonny, deeply traditional and often insecure, struggled with her evolution. Still, they had a child together, Chastity Bono, later known as Chaz, born in 1969, and for a time that bonded them. Cher described motherhood as a spiritual awakening. Holding her child gave her a kind of peace she'd never known. But it wasn't enough to hold the marriage together. By 1974, Sonny filed for legal separation. A year later, their divorce was finalized. It was messy, personally and professionally. Cher sued Sonny for financial mismanagement. He had signed contracts that left her broke. She said, "I was young, and I trusted him. That was my mistake." Still, Cher never denied what Sonny had meant to her. Years later, after his unexpected death in 1998, she stood before a packed crowd at his funeral and delivered a eulogy that stunned the room. She called him the most unforgettable person she'd ever met. She called him her mentor, her partner, her family. Through tears, she honored his impact, not just on her life, but on the world. They had been through everything: poverty, fame, parenthood, betrayal, and heartbreak. And despite it all, she said, "He was the love of my life." Their story was far from perfect, but it was real. And even after the end, their names remained forever linked. Sonny gave Cher her first stage, but she would go on to build an empire of her own. Cher once said, "I always wanted to be a mom. It's what I wanted more than anything." But the road to motherhood wasn't easy. She suffered multiple miscarriages before Chaz was born. So when she finally held her baby in her arms, she described the feeling as every day being like Christmas. That's how much joy Chaz brought into her life. Chaz grew up in the limelight, appearing on the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour at just 2 years old. He was quiet, kind, and surprisingly well-behaved, even with the chaos of fame surrounding him. But as he grew older, Cher noticed something. Chaz wasn't thriving in school, so she enrolled him in acting classes one summer. And that changed everything. Acting helped Chaz find his confidence and his voice. It gave him his own identity, separate from his famous parents. On March 4th, 1969, in the height of their fame, Sonny and Cher welcomed their first and only child together, a baby named Chastity's son Bono. He was named after the film Chastity, written by Sonny and starring Cher. The name at the time seemed poetic, a symbol of a hopeful future for a family trying to hold itself together. The world saw them as music royalty. But at home, things were far from perfect. Still, for Cher, this baby changed everything. She said the moment Chastity was born, her world completely shifted. "It felt like getting a best friend I'd been waiting for my whole life," she later recalled. And even though she was touring, recording, and filming TV shows, Cher was all in as a mother. She traveled with her son in tow, cradling him in green rooms, changing diapers between takes, keeping him close on tour buses. At just 6 weeks old, Chastity was already on the road with Sonny and Cher. The stage became his playpen. The spotlight was his nightlight. As Chastity got older, he began appearing on the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, often closing the show with a kiss from mom and dad. Viewers across America saw a smiling child on screen. But what they didn't see was the pressure behind it. The lack of privacy. The weight of being born into a brand, not just a family. From the outside, it looked picture perfect. The ideal celebrity family. But by the mid-1970s, Sonny and Cher's marriage was falling apart. Cher was discovering herself as an artist and a woman. Sonny, deeply traditional, couldn't handle her independence. Their divorce in 1975 left Cher raising Chastity mostly on her own. And while Cher worked to rebuild her life and career, she kept one priority steady: her child. She always made sure Chastity felt safe, loved, and grounded, even when everything else was shifting. But even in childhood, Chastity began feeling different. There was a discomfort he couldn't name yet, a quiet tension between how he was seen and how he felt. He didn't enjoy being in dresses. He didn't like being called she. He didn't have the language for it yet. But the inner conflict was already there. As a teen, Chastity pulled away from the spotlight. He struggled in school, bounced between identities, and tried to find some stability. Cher, always watching closely, noticed the struggle and did what she could. She enrolled Chastity in acting classes, hoping it might help, and it did. Suddenly, something clicked. Performing gave Chastity a sense of control, a way to express what couldn't be put into words. That passion led to a scholarship at the elite LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts in New York. It was a fresh start, a place where Chastity could exist as more than Cher's child, but the internal struggle continued. In high school, Chastity was cast in a male role for a play, and for the first time it felt natural, powerful, liberating. He felt more like himself than he ever had before. But in the early 80s, there was no space in Hollywood or society for that truth. So he buried it and tried to live within the lines. He explored music, formed a band, did public speaking, even became an LGBTQ+ advocate. But nothing really settled the dissonance. Because deep down, he wasn't just uncomfortable with how the world saw him, he was uncomfortable in his own skin. In 2009, after years of private struggle, Chastity made a public and life-changing decision. He came out as a transgender man and began the process of transitioning. Now known as Chaz Bono, he stepped into his true identity at age 40 and made the bold choice to do it publicly in front of millions. He knew what that meant. The headlines, the criticism, the questions. But he was ready. He documented his transition in the 2011 film Becoming Chaz, which premiered at Sundance and aired on OWN. It was raw, honest, and at times heartbreaking, but it was also hopeful. It gave countless viewers, trans and cis alike, a window into the real-life journey of self-discovery. For Cher, the transition was difficult to process at first. She admitted she had to grieve the child she thought she had. But once she understood the truth, that Chaz was finally happy, her love became even fiercer. She told friends, "I admire Chaz's courage. All I want is for my child to be happy. That's what matters most to me." And she meant it. After transitioning, Chaz stepped back into the spotlight. But this time, on his own terms. He competed on Dancing with the Stars in 2011, the show's first transgender contestant, and won over audiences with his humor, humility, and determination. He landed roles in shows like American Horror Story, The Secret Life of the American Teenager, and The Bold and the Beautiful. He even took to the stage in serious theater roles, drawing on the emotional depth of everything he'd been through. And through it all, his relationship with Cher grew stronger. They marched together at protests. They supported each other's projects. They shared private moments of laughter, of healing, of reflection. Chaz once said, "My mom's been there for me. We don't always understand each other right away, but she never gives up on me." And Cher, she said, "I'm proud, so proud. Not because of what Chaz does, but because of who he is." Chaz Bono's story is about so much more than gender. It's about finding yourself in a world that tried to define you before you could speak. It's about bravery, not the loud kind, but the quiet, painful kind. The kind that says, "This is who I am," even if no one else understands it yet. And for Cher, a mother who's lived her life in the public eye, Chaz's journey is her greatest lesson, her greatest heartbreak, and her greatest pride. Because in the end, it's not about who the world wants you to be. It's about who you are when you finally stop hiding. And Chaz Bono, he stopped hiding and became more than a name. He became a voice, a man, a survivor, a son. On July 10, 1976, Cher gave birth to her second child, Elijah Blue Allman. His father was rock legend Gregg Allman of the Allman Brothers Band. The timing was chaotic. The love was real, but the world around them was anything but stable. Just a few days before Elijah was born, Cher had filed for divorce from Greg. 9 days into the marriage, she had already tried to walk away. Addiction, instability, and emotional distance were setting in fast, but they reconciled, for a moment, long enough to welcome their son into the world. Cher would later say she stayed longer than she should have, not for herself, but to try and give Elijah a chance at a peaceful family. "I stayed until I knew I couldn't anymore," she said, "because I didn't want the kids to be around that." By 1979, the marriage was over for good, and Cher was left raising 2 sons, one in the public eye and one who often felt left in the shadows. From the start, Elijah was different. He was sharp, introverted, intense. Cher would later describe him as someone with an enormous, complicated mind, someone who danced to his own beat and didn't care who noticed. She said they had their first fight when he was 9 months old, joking, but only half. Their connection was deep, but never easy. "We talk through osmosis," she once said. "We don't always understand each other, but we know the love is there." Elijah grew up watching his mother perform for millions and battle legal fights, watching her date famous men, watching her balance fame and motherhood the best she could. But in many ways, he was on the outside looking in. His relationship with his father, Greg Allman, was strained. Greg struggled with drugs throughout Elijah's childhood and wasn't around much, physically or emotionally. Elijah later said, "He just wasn't there, not when I needed him." And while Cher tried to provide stability, hiring tutors, surrounding him with supportive adults, Elijah felt the void. He grew up with men like Val Kilmer, Gene Simmons, and others acting as father figures. But he knew deep down that wasn't the same. And that sense of displacement, of being unclaimed, stayed with him. Like his parents, Elijah found his voice through music. He took up guitar and found solace in writing. Music became his therapy, his rebellion, his identity. He eventually adopted the stage name P. Exeter Blue, and in the late 90s, he formed the industrial rock band Deadsy. Dark, heavy, cinematic. The sound was a mix of 9 Inch Nails and Bowie, with a haunting elegance all its own. Deadsy released multiple albums and toured with major acts like Limp Bizkit and Korn. Elijah was carving out his own world, far away from pop, from glitter, from his mom's spotlight. But the personal struggles followed him. He battled with addiction, depression, and long periods of estrangement, both from Cher and his father. In interviews, Elijah has spoken candidly about the gaps in his childhood, about feeling lost in the chaos, and about the long process of trying to find himself, not as Cher's son, not as Greg's heir, but as his own person. In the early 2010s, he reconnected with his father. They spent real time together before Greg Allman passed away in 2017. Elijah said, "I saw him more in the last year of his life than I had in decades. We were healing, slowly." His relationship with Cher remained more complicated. They've had periods of deep connection and long silences. Cher has always expressed her love, but admits, "We don't speak the same language. But I'll never stop showing up." In 2013, Elijah married singer Mary Angela Queenie King. At first, they seemed like a creative, passionate match. But as the years went on, the relationship began to fracture. In 2021, they separated. In 2022, things took a darker turn. Queenie alleged that Cher had hired 4 men to forcibly remove Elijah from their hotel room, a claim Cher denied, calling it absolutely untrue, but admitting she would do anything to help her son if he were in danger. Then came December 2023, when Cher filed for conservatorship over Elijah, citing mental health issues and substance abuse. Court documents described it as a matter of life or death. She tried to fast-track the process. It was denied. Twice. In the public eye, the headlines looked dramatic, but behind them was a mother still trying to save her son. Eventually, in September 2024, Elijah and Cher reached a private agreement, ending the court battle, at least for now. But the turbulence didn't stop. In April 2025, Queenie filed for divorce a second time, citing irreconcilable differences. She released a statement saying, "We had a beautiful 13-year journey. I'll always cherish it. Elijah will always have a place in my heart." Elijah Blue Allman's story is still unfolding. He's a man who grew up in the echoes of icons, a man who fought to be seen on his own terms, and still struggles to find peace. He is brilliant, troubled, talented, and fiercely independent, just like his mother. And for Cher, raising Elijah hasn't been easy. It's been painful. It's been confusing. But it's also been one of the most important chapters of her life. Because motherhood doesn't end when your children turn 18. It doesn't stop when they push you away. It doesn't pause for court cases or rehab or heartbreak. It's unconditional, messy, relentless. And for Cher, Elijah will always be her son. No matter the distance, no matter the silence, no matter how many times they fall and try to find each other again. Final reflections on Cher as a mother. Fame made Cher iconic. Motherhood made her human. For all the awards on her shelf, the Oscar, the Emmy, the Grammy, the decades of platinum records, Cher has always said her greatest achievement is raising her two sons, Chaz Bono and Elijah Blue Allman. And not because it was easy, but because it was real. Cher has lived her life in the harshest light, the stage light, the camera flash, the spotlight of constant scrutiny. She's endured heartbreak, betrayal, miscarriages, addiction in the family, public criticism, and private grief. But she's also endured love. Through every chapter, one thing has stayed constant: her devotion to her kids, even when they didn't understand her, even when she didn't fully understand them. She once said on Dr. Phil, "I wish I could have offered more stability, but this job doesn't mix well with raising children. Still, I wanted them. My life would have meant nothing without them." That one sentence says it all. With Chaz, the journey was one of understanding. From joyful baby to curious child to an adult discovering his truth as a transgender man, Cher had to learn to let go of expectations and embrace the deeper, more complex layers of love. And she did, fully. With Elijah, the road was different. It was turbulent, mysterious, full of closeness and distance, pain and reconciliation. There were years when they didn't talk. There were court filings. There were heartbreaks. But Cher never stopped reaching out, even if she didn't always know how. She raised two very different sons, each with their own battles, their own brilliance, their own need to break free. And in doing so, Cher was forced to grow too. Motherhood didn't soften her edges. It made her stronger. It made her more honest. Because raising children while being Cher, a global star, a working woman in a male-dominated industry, came with sacrifices no one could see from the outside. She missed birthdays. She missed school plays. She was sometimes gone when they needed her most. And she carries that weight. But she never gave up. In many ways, Cher's story as a mother mirrors her story as a woman. Imperfect, resilient, unapologetically complicated. She showed the world that being a mom doesn't mean fitting a mold. It means doing your best, even when the cameras are off, even when the love is messy, even when your children grow up to live lives you didn't expect. She raised her sons in the pressure cooker of fame, and both of them, in their own ways, have survived, because she loved them out loud. And if there's one lesson to take from Cher's life as a mother, it's this: love is not always tidy, but it is always worth fighting for. Today, Cher is still performing, still touring, still proving that age, grief, and change won't stop her. But beyond the spotlight, she's still a mom, still rooting for Chaz, still hoping for peace with Elijah, still loving them fiercely in a world that never made it easy. That's what makes her legacy so powerful. Not just the stardom, not just the music, but the fact that she stood in the storm and kept being their mother, no matter what. If Cher's journey moved you, inspired you, or made you see her in a new light, leave a comment below. Tell us what part of her story hit home for you. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because behind every icon, there's a human story, and this was Cher's. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If Cher's story touched you in any way, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you never miss a new story. And drop a comment below. What part of Cher's journey stuck with you the most? Thanks for being here. See you in the next one.